Hello, people of the interwebs. My name is David Bernard. I am the founder and one of the owners of LeadBetter AI. We are a marketing technologies and services company that specializes in helping acupuncturists and integrative medicine practitioners find profitability and work-life balance in a way that is consistent with all of the principles of TCM and the things that they encourage their patients to do. So today we are having our inaugural podcast with Chris Butler. He is the owner and founder of the Wellpath Center in Wellspring, New Jersey. He's been a practitioner for well over 20 years. I think he said all the way back to 1998. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, it is.
And Chris is a LAC and an FABORM. Tell me, what is an FABORM?
That's a fellow of the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine. So I've helped a lot of women who were having trouble conceiving and having a live birth to have a baby.
Okay, great.
And that's always a very happy occasion.
Okay. And so you started as an acupuncturist and you've been doing that for a long time. Tell me, do you specialize in any specific kinds of conditions?
Well, I have definitely specialized in, straight out of school back in the 90s, I made it a point to really learn a lot about how a woman's body works. Mostly women go to doctors, and it's the reproductive system is far more complex. But most importantly, Chinese medicine is phenomenal at helping women achieve like a normal period every month. So that's an area that I've really spent a lot of time in. In 2007, the American Board of Oriental Reproductive Medicine was founded, and I joined that, had to pass a board exam, and started helping a lot of women have become pregnant, and kind of concomitantly, the allopathic medicine fertility sciences ramped up, and so it became a joint effort really between, most of the women I see are also going to a reproductive endocrinologist, but it improves their outcomes, and most fertility clinics now have an acupuncturist on staff. But my belief is that women really need, if they can't conceive at an age that they should be able to conceive at, and there's nothing say genetically wrong with them, it's usually has to do with their lifestyle. And, I just look over their whole history, their blood work, everything, and try to figure out where is their body not working the way it's working. So gynecology has been endometriosis, painful periods, all of that has been very important part of my practice. Most recently, I spent 4 years studying with someone who has a center in Brighton, England, who practices dermatology, mainly the treatment of psoriasis, which is autoimmune, eczema, which is atopic, and then acne is very well treated by Chinese medicine, as well as a collection of other diseases that most people aren't familiar with. And that's primarily herbal as opposed to acupuncture. Mm-hmm. In 2003, I started studying functional medicine, which is essentially the personalization of Chinese medicine. If you take that template and overlay it with the model of Western medicine that most of the doctors that anybody goes to uses. So it becomes like a way of thinking based on the Western model to understand how the body is not functioning properly and how to correct it.
Right. I think that's a good point to kind of emphasize, is that when it comes to acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine in particular, I think that the public is certainly becoming more aware of what Chinese medicine is about, the kinds of things that it can treat, but it's still somewhat limited in terms of the reasons that a person might, who's not initiated into a worldview or a health view, at least,
right,
of what Chinese medicine can address. They know about pain, maybe they might know about I don't know, weight loss, facial rejuvenation, smoking cessation, kind of some basic things, but they don't realize that it can be good for autoimmune disease. They don't realize that it can be good for fertility. They don't realize that it is a comprehensive model that is meant to address any condition related to human health, right? And so what would you say to somebody that is uninitiated and has never been to an acupuncturist, and specifically with the relationship between functional medicine and acupuncture? How would you break it down for them in terms of?
Sure. I would say the biggest misunderstanding in the public is that acupuncture is a modality within the greater whole of Chinese medicine, which is really a system of medicine. It's a very highly sophisticated system of medicine that does not rely on technology the way allopathic medicine does. And I think because people get licensed as acupuncturists, people don't really hear anything about acupuncture other than, oh, it helped my friend's back pain or something like that. And it's phenomenal for pain, acupuncture. At the allopathic model that we use in all our hospitals and stuff, and all you focused on was surgery, or all you focused on was drugs, pharmacology. It's just a piece of the whole. And it's really a lens to look through so that you can start to understand pathology or dysfunctionality within the human organism. And then that leads you to ways to correct it. So it could be changing your diet. It could be taking herbal medicine. It could be taking nutritional supplements that don't fall under the category of herbs. It could involve acupuncture, but it may well not involve acupuncture. I mean, I don't have to give someone acupuncture to treat psoriasis at all. I don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah,
but,
so you're telling me that as an acupuncturist, you're not a witch doctor or a shaman or somebody that uses
practitioner of voodoo
and woo woo to consult the tea leaves and intuit through some kind of divine matrix.
It's interesting you say it that way, because this is something I've run up against for years, which is people put this mystique on Chinese medicine, like there's something magical going on, or there's some sort of woo woo, as you say. There isn't. It's like the least woo-woo thing I've ever studied in my life. There's very little. I mean, there is spirituality or woo-woo-ness within Chinese medicine, but if you go to visit an acupuncturist with a problem, you're not going to get into that at all. And I think a lot of acupuncturists aren't even aware of that.
Yeah,
I think medicine.
I think a lot of people have that sense because of the exotic language that is used to diagnose and describe conditions in Chinese medicine. It's just culturally something that we don't have any reference point for. Terminology is so exotic to us that it sounds like magic, or it sounds like something that falls outside of science. And what they don't realize is that Chinese medicine is probably one of the oldest empirical sciences. I went to school for Chinese medicine as well. I have my MSAOM. So we studied case studies, where you're literally just reading thousands and thousands and thousands of references to what some ancient doctor tried, what the results were, how he adapted his treatment, what those results were, and on and on and on and on, trial and error for 5,000 years until they found patterns that shook out in some sense of what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's a great summation. And I think it's just phenomenal that you can sit there and read a week-to-week case study that's 1,800 years old. And that's really one of the huge strengths of Chinese medicine. They wrote it all down. They have meticulous records of what they've done for at least 2,500 years. And it's just, modern medicine as we know it, and as phenomenal as it is, and the incredible things that it does, is only about 100 plus years old.
Right.
It's like a toddler compared to Chinese medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, it can do things Chinese medicine could never do. So, but it relies on technology. and
Right.
pharmacology.
Right. And isolating, specific microorganisms or bacterias or, the causation is very less complicated and nuanced inside of the allopathic model. That when the traditional Chinese medicine model breaks down the nature of disease and pathology, it is using a pattern-based model as far as understanding
Yes.
nature and quality of things. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm smiling because you're basically speaking in another language using English words. But it looks at the body very, according to this model that was developed 1,000, 2,000, it's been refined over the years, but I mean, it really began its genesis was, probably 3,000 years ago. And it's really looking at the body as a functional unit. I was listening to Deepak Chopra the other day. He was talking about quantum, what did he call it? A quantum body. And he's like, your body is never the same 1 minute to the next. We talk about our body the way we talk about our car, like it's this static thing, but it's not. It's always changing. Whether you're talking about emotions or aging or what you ate or how you slept or the weather or your stress level, it goes on and on and on. And what Chinese medicine offers is this lens to look through so you can understand the changes that are going on and what you can do to, improve the functionality of the body. It also makes the assumption that everything we need to be healthy is here on Earth. We don't need to necessarily, reach into the chemical realm, say drugs, for example, reach into the chemical realm to correct things. If that was the case, we wouldn't be here as a species. We survived knowing nothing about what we were doing and just eating the stuff that didn't kill us.
Right.
And
Right.
what something like Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine has done is, bring a whole understanding to all of that so that it can be manipulated and it can be used as a way of, problem solving, health
Right.
problems.
Yeah. I think that's a point that shouldn't be underemphasized. Like, we become accustomed to, a pharmacological model around symptom resolutions based on taking pills or getting a shot or having some kind of intervention that is artificial, and that if it wasn't dreamed up and, you know, conceived and produced inside of a lab, and if it's not something a mad scientist or a rational scientist created, then it's not real medicine, and that's ridiculous. What most people don't know is that most of the chemicals that are patented medicines originated in some kind of herbal formula where
Yes.
they broke down the constituent parts of that formula to try to isolate what chemical compound is most responsible for creating the desired result when ingested. Um, can you expound on that and in terms of how people think about medicine in TCM versus allopathic?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a secondhand story from the man I learned dermatology from, because he had gone to China. He's English. He had gone to China and studied with, a variety of different, very renowned dermatologists in China using Chinese medicine, which is primarily herbal in this case. And he came back to England after 5 years in China, and he had a friend who was a doctor, and they were running, this was 30 years ago, they were running a study to compare the treatment of eczema using Western medicine, which is typically steroids, and versus Chinese medicine. The problem is they had no idea how to put together a formula of Chinese herbs to treat eczema. So they called Mazen and asked if he would do it, and he agreed. And Chinese medicine blew Western medicine out of the water. It wasn't even a competition. I mean, the people that were doing the Chinese medicine did so much better because, you know, you can take a steroid and it'll calm your eczema down quickly. As soon as you stop that steroid, it comes roaring right back.
Right.
And you can't take steroids indefinitely. I mean, they're very destructive to the system. Whereas the Chinese medicine, you would go through this process of like treating the acute phase, then going into a stage of what's called harmonization, where you're trying to get the elements that are out of balance back into some kind of balance. And then ultimately what's called consolidation, where you're bringing that all together and you're kind of like just solidifying the whole that you've basically recreated. But in that journey, you learned what you were doing that caused your skin to flare, what to avoid, or what you were missing. Or maybe you weren't sleeping, or maybe you weren't drinking enough water. Whatever it is, it's a journey that you go on with the doctor. He's using his knowledge or her knowledge to understand how things are out of balance, and then teaching you what to look for in your own body, like your own experience, your own bodily experience, what to look for, and giving you some insight and understanding as to what it means. Like if you get headaches every afternoon, why are you getting headaches every afternoon? You know, well, I don't eat all day. Well, then you're getting low blood sugar. You know, I'm trying to simplify it. It's usually far more complex than that. But I mean, I'm glad I brought that up. Low blood sugar is a huge, huge, huge problem and causes many, 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 many symptoms, and, you know, causes people to remain chronically ill. And yet it is never talked about because the only thing to fix it is eating.
Right.
There's no drug for low blood sugar.
Right. Yeah.
So I would say, you know, the main difference is rather than just trying to calm down symptoms or, you know, look, pharmacology came out with a drug, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago that cured hepatitis C. Hepatitis C was one of the most horrible diseases. People didn't even know they had it until it was far too late and they needed a liver transplant. And, you know, they had no way of treating it. And they came out with these drugs that literally cure it. It's gone. Like once you take this drug for 2 or 3 weeks, it's gone. And you know, I applaud that. I think that's amazing.
Right.
But that's not usually the case with most illnesses. You can't come up with a quote unquote cure. And so you're left, especially with, say, autoimmunity, you're left managing it. And so the whole thing becomes a journey with the practitioner and the patient and the cooperation and the symbiosis that's built between them to learn, you know, the doctor's learning that person's body, their lifestyle, their personality, you know, what their tendencies are, and then reflecting back to them what they need to change and helping them understand and connect dots and that kind of thing. I mean, I think that's the biggest part of a doctor. It's like, I don't have magical powers that I can wave my hand over you and make you better.
Yeah, so I think that brings us to something that is an important distinction between the allopathic model and the integrated one, which is that the role of the doctor inside of a holistic practice is one in which, like you said, it's a very personalized type of medicine. There is no pill that can be mass distributed to everybody equally in kind. That everything is customized according to the presentations, the genetics, the disposition, the the length, the duration of experiencing specific conditions, the lifestyle. There's so many ingredients in the matrix that defines what somebody's overall health paradigm looks like. And when, I'm not trying to shit on the that kind of model, but it's a very different model than the one that you practice. And so for somebody who's never worked with a Chinese medicine practitioner, with somebody who has never had acupuncture or used any kind of TCM style herbs, yeah, let's expand a little bit more on what it's like to work with someone like you and what to expect.
Well, I would expect that I would say the most important thing is you need to be willing to be a partner in the process of healing. I always use the example with people that, if something's wrong with your car, you bring it to the mechanic, you drop it off, you come back and it's better. Your car's better. You can't do that with your body. I mean, if you need surgery or something, that's different. Like I had a horrible knee injury and they put me to sleep and I woke up and my knee eventually worked.
Right.
But it's like, let me kind of paint a picture so people can understand it. So let's say you're someone who suffers from migraines.
Mhm.
And you come to the practitioner, you're like, I get migraines every day. And I take Furacet or I take, whatever the migraine medicine of the year is.
Right.
And you're like, oh, it's great because as soon as I feel, this symptom, I take it and it like derails the whole thing. I'm like, but these drugs are very toxic and you're taking them every day. What's that doing to you? Oh, I don't know. I never thought of that. You're just trusting the doctor. And I'm not criticizing anybody here. I'm just what it is. Versus you go, you really dig into the person's history and get a very detailed history. When did their migraines start? What are they associated with? Are they affected by weather? Do you think there's a food effect? Anything like that. And you start to try to figure out, what are the causes here? You're asking the question, why is this person getting migraines every day? And I've had people that it's been gluten, for example, and I take them off gluten and they never get another migraine.
Right.
Or I use a Chinese herbal formula that is much more complex in terms of its effect on the human body than say a migraine medication is. And I remember one woman in particular, I hadn't seen her in about 7 years, and she was a daily migraine sufferer. And I just ran into her one day in town, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so happy I saw you. I just wanted to let you know I haven't had a migraine in 7 years.
Wow.
And she was getting them daily. I mean, it was just, I was listening to her story initially, and I was just like, how do you live? I mean, the level of pain she lived with was just beyond imagination for me. So, I'd say the most important thing is if you really want to cure a chronic disease, and when you're coming to an acupuncture, someone who practices Chinese medicine or someone who really practices functional medicine, because to me, there's different languaging, but they're kind of doing the same thing. You're undoing whatever you did to create your problem. Do you know what I'm saying? Or, you can say, well, what if my problem's genetic? When migraines are often genetic. Well, you're doing things to either exacerbate or help the expression, what's called the epigenetic expression of that genetic SNP, So just because you have a genetic problem doesn't mean you're married to this problem for the rest of your life, in the sense that you can't do anything about it. There's many things you can do about the expression of that disease. But it takes work on both the part of the practitioner and the part of the patient. Like, they have to be willing to make changes and stick to them, not for a week, but maybe for the rest of their life. It depends what it is. But I would say, if I had to tell somebody something, that's go to your PCP and you're there and they got their hand on the doorknob 3 minutes after they walk in the room.
Right.
They've already decided they're going to write you a prescription for fill in the blank, so they're done. In their head, they're done. And you're just like, nah, I want to know why this is happening. And they think the doctor's doing that. They're not.
No.
They're just identifying, oh, you have migraines, you need to take this. We're going to try this drug, and we'll see how it works. And if it doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Right.
That's a very, very different model than what I'm talking about. And these are the traditional medicines of the world, what I'm talking about, Ayurveda, Chinese being the most well known, but I mean, there's all sorts of different systems that have evolved out of different cultures.
Right. So you're looking at a much more comprehensive list of things that can contribute to the overall picture of health, or even, specific health problems.
Basically, you're asking the question, why?
Right.
Why is this happening?
But the kinds of things that you're taking into account, you use some lab work, right, to get blood panels and that kind of stuff.
I use blood panels. I use saliva panels. I'll look at imaging. If somebody's coming in with pain, I'll look at MRIs, look at X-rays. So I mean, to me, the future of medicine is integrative medicine, because allopathic medicine is, I mean, they do incredible, amazing things. I mean, I would, there are a lot of alternative practitioners that really poo-poo on Western medicine or allopathic medicine, but I don't. I mean, yeah, there's things that are horrible, but there's a lot of value there. And then when you combine it with going in and doing a thorough history and changing the things in a person's lifestyle, and then using allopathic medicine where it's needed, it's incredibly powerful.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I've found learning functional medicine, being able to look at blood work in a functional way, like, well, if this value is this and this value is that, so this other value should be this. And you're connecting dots on a blood test. What does a doctor do? For the most part, they look at the blood test and they just run their eyes down it to see if anything's out of range. But what if you're 13 years old and you're right at the top of the range? At 13, you're supposed to be right in the middle of the range, not at the top of the range. That's like a red flag for me. It's like, well, she's only 13. Why is her blood sugar, 99?
Right.
It's in range, but that's a high blood sugar for a 13-year-old.
Sure.
Versus the person's 89. You know what I'm saying? Then you look at the 99 and you're like, okay, that's no big deal.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a practical application of what it is you do and what it is you teach. We were talking before the podcast, and you mentioned something that you had learned about the definition of the word doctor in, I think, Greek. You said doctor is a teacher.
Just teacher. A doctor teaches you, and it kind of like dawned on me not too long ago. It's like, right, people need to be taught how to navigate physical reality in terms of, diet and sleep and water intake and exercise and fresh air and sunshine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They need to learn how to navigate all this in order to not only get better, but to stay well.
Right.
I mean, in the end, for practitioners like myself, in the end, once the condition the person came in for is more or less cured, it's like, well, now you can cultivate wellness. You can do things to actually cultivate wellness. So when you reach 75 years old, you're not an invalid. You can be incredibly vibrant. I mean, I know people I had a 101-year-old patient come into me because she had broke her arm because she had the presence of mind to jump to try to grab her 99-year-old sister as she was falling on these granite stairs in front of a church.
Oh my goodness.
She actually grabbed her sister, moved fast enough to grab her sister, and then they both tumbled down the granite and she broke her arm. But the point is, this woman was sharp as a tack. She was sitting in there with her aide, and they were going back and forth and laughing and telling jokes. And it was just, I mean, for me, that was like eye-opening. I mean, I think this woman just had incredible genetics. She was, but it showed me what's possible in their mind, and their reaction time can be that quick. We've kind of grown up, most of us in this country, expecting that by the time you're in your late 60s, you're starting to really go downhill, and your 70s are your golden years, whatever that means. And by your 80s, you're like,
done.
You're just trying to keep everything taped together.
Right.
It does not have to be that way at all.
I think that's the exciting and intimidating part of what you essentially espouse when you're a TCM practitioner, that on the one hand, there's the intimidating aspect of it, which is that you are in fact responsible for your health, that it requires a lifestyle, a consistency, and a discipline to not just try to live like you're still in your 20s when you're not. That the kind of abuses that we engage in need to be done in moderation, and that there has to be kind of a big picture approach to managing your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your nutritional health. Like that there is a paradigm that makes up your human experience that needs to be managed. All of the pieces need to be managed together, and that can be quite intimidating on the one hand. But on the other hand, it means that you have more control over your quality of experience than you've ever given yourself credit for. That you don't just have to keep adding
Yes.
pills to your diet and just
Yes.
treating symptoms.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that autoimmunity is something that has become more and more and more and more common in most Western countries, and I'm not sure about places like Africa and South America and all that, but certainly in the U.S., so autoimmunity has exploded. There is no cure for autoimmunity. Once your immune system, autoimmunity is when your immune system targets what I call self-tissue. So everybody's familiar with rheumatoid arthritis. Your immune system is targeting the tissue that makes up your joints and creating inflammation and a slow degradation or loss of the cartilage. And everyone's seen people like this with rheumatoid arthritis. It's horrible. I've had phenomenal results with RA, but it took work. It took work on my part, and it took work on the patient's part. But now they're not married to a future of basically being in 24/7 pain and lack of mobility.
Right. So would you say that your role as a doctor is akin to being, maybe more like a coach? Like you do
Yeah.
interventions as necessary, but that's not your main job, is it?
I'm sorry.
You do interventions, you might do acupuncture, you might prescribe herbs and other kinds of nutritional supplements and things like that, but a lot of what you're doing is coaching people and giving them a picture of what's going on inside of their body, and then telling them how they need to adjust their behaviors, and maybe attitudes around their own health in order to do, you're coaching them to do it themselves, right?
Yeah. And I like to inject humor in that, because no, honestly, I've run across practitioners who think they're so proud of all they know, and they're sort of like, haughty and arrogant about it. And look, I grew up eating Lucky Charms and Captain Crunch and eating crap 24/7. I'm not judging anybody. I appreciate the fact that I've pushed myself to change my diet dramatically, and that my health is really good now. Because I felt pretty awful as a teenager and in college and my early adulthood. So yeah, you need to be able to I had a patient the other day who was talking about having gone to the doctor, and the doctor came in, never looked at her, was looking at the computer with his back to her, talking to her, telling her what she needed to do. To say that was off-putting would be like the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting with somebody, I'm asking them questions about everything. I'm listening to their stories of the weekend or whatever. I'm gathering information from all of this.
Yeah.
And then reflecting it back. Well, how did it feel like? How did you feel when you ate that pizza? Because you're allergic to gluten and you shouldn't have pizza. And then they can, as they describe it to me, they're describing it to themselves too, and they're actually loud in front of somebody else. Like, yeah, after I ate the pizza, as this Australian guy said to me, I felt like I got hit by a truck. And he couldn't believe it. He was blown away. He had no idea gluten had anything to do with how crappy he felt.
Right.
And he just couldn't get over it. And I only saw him for like a couple of weeks because he was moving to Ireland. But I'm sure he never went back. Like, he was just flabbergasted at the fact that, you know, by eliminating gluten, he felt so much better. And he was a migraine sufferer too. His migraine stopped.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is definitely a coaching position, a teaching position, and it's a humbling position because not everything you think is going to work the way you think it's going to work. And then you're back to like the drawing board, but it helps you from not, you know, becoming, you know, all puffy chested about it or something like, I did this, you know.
Right.
Because if you remain humble as the doctor, there's a lot you can learn.
Sure.
I'm learning every day. I never stop. If I stop learning, then I might as well stop practicing because, you know, what am I doing?
It's a trial and error kind of a thing where you're trying to understand and put the pieces together, and what you identify as a pattern may or may not be the pattern that is most relevant.
Yeah, I'm actually glad this came up because this is something that, you know, where the allopathic model, you know, let's stick with migraines. You come in with migraines, they give you, say, Fioricet or whatever, and it works. It doesn't cure the migraines, but it stops the experience of the migraine in its tracks when you're actually having the migraine. That's a very different model than understanding all the different parts of your life that are contributing to that problem.
Yeah,
and it takes a very different type of practitioner. Like, you have to be very present with the person and feel like you're in it together. And
Right.
you don't know the answer necessarily, and they don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And trial and error is true. I mean, this is where some people kind of get, you know, they'll come in and they'll say do 2 acupuncture treatments, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't work. I'm like, you've had this problem for 12 years. I go, it's not going to go away in 2 weeks with 2 acupuncture treatments. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and there's a lot to correct. So, you know, I think people that do what I do are constantly fighting against this. Everyone wants instant gratification because that's what they're used to. But what many of them don't realize is, just because you've medicated a problem away doesn't mean you still have the problem. Like, I asked a person once, you know, do you have high blood pressure? And they're like, no, I don't have high blood pressure. I go, well, you're on a hypertensive medication. Yeah, I take the medication, so I don't have high blood pressure. I go, but if you stop the medication, your high blood pressure comes right back, right? Oh, yeah. I go, so you have high blood pressure. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
They're not, and I'm not saying high blood pressure is always something that can be cured either, but you know, people do that with all sorts of problems.
Right.
I don't get cramps during my period because I take the pill. Like, well, it's a birth control pill. It's not a period cramp pill. And you still need Midol.
Right.
You know.
Right. The way that
and here, let's do 4 weeks of acupuncture and take this herbal formula, and not only did you not get cramps, the color of your blood changed. You know, I'm not going to get graphic, but everything looked better.
Yeah.
That's healing.
Right. The way that I think about it is, you know, the pill the pill version of solving symptoms. It's like the leaky dam thing, right? Where you know, the dam is leaking and you stick your finger in the hole where the water's coming out, and then pressure continues to build behind the dam, and now it pops out over here, and then you got to stick your finger in that hole to plug it. And so, problem of the water pressurizing the dam and cracking it doesn't go away. It has to find a place to go, actually. And so, so by putting a medication as a it's meant to be a temporary fix until you get things under control, but it's treated like a,
so that you can then go and like work on the pressure,
right,
which
right.
is your, which is typically what you're doing in your lifestyle that creates that pressure. Like, how you eat, how you sleep, how you, all the different things that are the basics, as I call them.
Right. And okay, so just to wrap it up, we're kind of getting to the hour now. In terms of somebody that has never had any experience with this kind of medicine, is in a situation where they're suffering from something and they're at their wits' end, can you break down some of the things that you've had success specifically, the types of conditions, the types of patients that you've had and that you've seen improvement with, so that they are open to the possibilities of the kinds of things that an acupuncturist can address? And then the last thing that I want to talk about, if there's still time, is just the kinds of things that somebody can implement in their life to empower themselves to start to improve their health practically, even before they talk to somebody like you.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got lost at the, what's the first part of that?
The first part is what kind of patients have you had? What kind of conditions have you treated?
Oh, right. Okay, so I mean, look, acupuncture is a modality within a greater whole of Chinese medicine. It works terrifically well for pain. So the pain can be coming from arthritis, the pain can be coming from, a disc issue, it can be muscular, it can be neurological, anything having to do with the nervous system, like if it's neuropathy, or like I said, pain, acupuncture works typically very well for. A range of gynecological conditions, it works tremendously well for. Endometriosis is something that doctors often avoid diagnosing. I'm not going to go into it because it's supposed to be inside the uterus, comes outside the uterus, and women are having tremendous pain and bleeding and terrible symptomatology. And in the last 15 to 20 years, excision surgery has become the treatment of choice, but endometriosis keeps coming back. So you can cut it out, but it's just going to come back. Right. So if you can find ways with holistic medicine to stop it from coming back, you've really done a huge service to that person. So gynecology, fertility for sure. I treat a lot of psoriasis, which is an autoimmune skin condition, and have gotten tremendous results with it. Same with eczema, completely different mechanisms, but a very disabling skin condition. And look, I mean, this kind of medicine can really just help people's skin stay young. There's a lot of people that spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on, all sorts of skin treatments and everything else. And yeah, it looks great for the week, but you're not helping the skin itself. The skin is your largest organ. Right. It's an organ. And it needs, care, but it needs directed care. Everybody's skin is, some people have oily skin, some people have dry skins, there's many different things to look at. Migraine headaches. I treat all sorts of digestive problems, SIBO, irritable bowel disease like Crohn's or colitis, irritable bowel syndrome. It really covers the gamut of most things. I mean, I would say that, if you have something and you haven't gotten answers from your doctor, give someone who practices Chinese medicine a call and say, is this something you can treat? Yeah. Because chances are the answer is going to be yes. I can be helpful here. And maybe I can't do everything for you, but I can be helpful here.
Well, maybe I can rapid fire a few things off, and you can say yay or nay as far as whether you had success helping with that. Okay. Diabetes.
Oh yes. Type 2. Type 1's autoimmune. Type 2, it's all about diet and exercise, honestly.
Yeah.
But there's Chinese medicine addresses diabetes very well. Yes.
Gastrointestinal issues like Crohn's, IBS, gastroenteritis, other non-specific
H. pylori, ulcers, yes, 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 and yes. And, I say that somewhat conditionally. It depends on how severe. I mean, I had a patient come in once who had an inflamed gallbladder that was about to blow. And I'm like, you need to get to the hospital now.
Yeah. Yeah. What
But I've
about
had people come in with congested gallbladders that I've worked with, and they've done pretty well. But it wasn't an acute situation.
mood disorders, depression, anxiety, stress disorders, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, those can be tougher to treat. Clearly they're multifactorial in terms of predispositions, genetics, lifestyle, the situation, and there's some people have depressing situations they're in. But yeah, I've had resounding success with that, and I've had people I wasn't able to help, to be honest. But yes, I would certainly look to Chinese medicine for that.
What about weight loss?
Insomnia, I'd throw in there too.
Yeah. Insomnia for sure. What about weight loss?
Yeah, well, yes, because I think oftentimes people need to understand how food is affecting them.
Mhm.
Because some people can eat, like I have a son who can eat carbs till the cows come home. The guy, he never gains an ounce. He's had a 31-inch waist or a 30-inch waist since he's been in high school. He's 30 almost. And he eats pretty well, to be fair. But, even when he wasn't eating well, he never gained an ounce. And then there's other people, they look at a cookie and they gain a pound.
Yeah.
So that's where the personalization of the treatment comes in. Everyone's going to be different in that respect.
Yeah, for sure. How about hormonal related imbalances, whether it's
Yes, absolutely.
okay.
And since the brain orchestrates the endocrine system, I would say I've treated a lot of people for post-concussive syndrome, and it's been nothing short of phenomenal sometimes. Many of the cases have been nothing short of phenomenal. I've treated people that are in the early stages of dementia and literally have them turned around in like a month in terms of their cognitive function. And they're like, I'm back to who I was. Did I cure them? No. Are they going to get dementia? Probably.
Yeah. I was just going to ask.
Did I stave it off for maybe 10 years? If they follow what I said for 10 years, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one, but I've had mostly really good results with that.
And what about other kinds of neurological conditions that are more akin to like brain injury kinds of things, like epilepsy, stroke? Alzheimer's.
I've not treated any stroke patients, so I can't really speak to that. I've had a couple of people come in with epilepsy. I can remember a 9-year-old girl who came in, and I looked at what she was eating, and I'm like, you need to change this diet. And I outlined the diet she needed and sent them to there was a pediatric neurology center at a hospital near me. I go, I want you to go to this center so that you're really getting the best possible care. And this poor kid, she was like a really spirited girl. She was, just really sweet little girl. But the way her epilepsy played out is she would become very combative with people. She had no control over her voice. She would just yell out in class and stuff. So the mom was getting like 3 calls a day from the school. The calls stopped within 2 weeks. They went up to the pediatric neurology center. They had her hooked up to, I guess it was an EEG. And the doctor's like, I've been doing this for 25 years. She's seizuring right now. He goes, I would never know that unless I could see it on the machine.
Wow. What about behavioral issues like Tourette's or even
Tourette's,
like autism?
Yeah, there's things that can be done for spectrum disorder. I've not had the opportunity to really work with that too much at all, really. Tourette's, I did have one case of Tourette's. This woman was going around the medical from doctor to doctor to doctor about this cough. And I'm listening to this cough going, boy, if that's a cough, I'm a dog, because that doesn't sound like a cough to me.
Mhm.
And I asked her about obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Well, her whole family, like her brothers, sisters, parents, everyone's got OCD. And I sort of made the connection that there was the immune system was attacking the brain in this case. And I changed her diet and took her off, foods that were triggers. It stopped in about 10 days.
That's amazing.
I
It's
know. I was blown away by that. I mean, I could not, this is the fun part of my job. When I get to see things like, wow, I never knew that was going to happen, but it did.
To create dysfunction. It really is. I think
And without getting overly negative, we have a food system in the United States that is highly corporatized.
Yeah.
So it is all based on profit motive and making the most money, and then using food chemists to make it either addictive or to taste good.
Right.
And none of these things are good for us.
Right.
And they're all in a sense poison. I don't mean poison like it's going to kill you tomorrow, but they're not helping you, they're hurting you.
Right. Yeah.
And
the
and
conspiratorial
keeping you sick.
the conspiratorial aspect of all of that, it could be a whole nother podcast worth. So.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's just, companies trying to maximize their profits like any company.
For sure. That's absolutely true. But just in the final couple of minutes that we have left, in terms of practical things that people that are maybe not ready to see a practitioner just yet, but are interested in incorporating some of the lifestyle and philosophy of TCM in a way that they can do at home. What would
Yeah,
be
and
general advice?
these simple things can make a huge difference. Our bodies were designed to move. Move your body. Do some kind of exercise. A walk is fine, and I'm not even minimizing a walk. I mean, walking can be great exercise. Don't over exercise, because some people will over exercise, but that's the main danger is people don't exercise. So exercise. Most people need to drink their body weight in ounces of water a day. So if you weigh 150, you need to drink about 150 ounces of water a day. And don't drink it all in the morning.
Or at night.
Drink it through the day, even if you're sipping on it. Sleep. Somehow we got the idea that 5 hours was enough sleep. 8 to 9 hours is like 7 is the absolute minimum, just going to get by without falling to pieces. But most people need about 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night. And it should be quality sleep. So you don't get into bed and hop on your phone for half an hour and then turn it off and expect to go right to sleep, because all that blue light hitting your brain is waking you up. And so you need to have sleep hygiene, or just a bedtime ritual of turning the lights down, calming down, being quiet, not being stimulated. Diet's huge. As a general rule of thumb, I'd say stay away from processed foods as much as possible. Stay out of restaurants, or at least the cheap restaurants, as much as possible. Don't eat fast food. Sugar is, look, I loved sugar as much as anybody alive in the earlier iteration of my life, but I don't eat any sugar now at all, ever. I mean, once in a blue moon, I'll have a little something here or there, but literally like 3 times a year. Sugar is probably one of the most deleterious things that we eat. Or people skip meals. Another big no-no. That's something, just don't skip meals. Eat 3 meals a day. Exercise and get fresh air. I mean, we were also designed to be outside. So, even if you get outside for half an hour or something, it can make a huge difference. And getting sunlight, getting exposed to sunlight, both on your skin and your eyes. And then there's your emotional life. I mean, I would say people often stimulate their emotions unnecessarily. Like scrolling on social media, this is a very new thing, obviously, but I think it's highly deleterious because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, and it just puts you in a really bad emotional state, and that affects your health.
Sure.
That affects your bodily health.
Yeah.
I think I got them all.
I think you covered it. Diet, sleep.
Diet, water, fresh air, exercise, sleep.
That sounds like we all know that, and yet we don't all do that. So
we all know it, David, but I think most people don't understand the depth to which if you don't get those fundamentals, how it becomes cumulative and wears down your body.
Right. Absolutely.
So it wears down. We started with homeostasis. It wears down the body's ability to self-regulate and achieve homeostasis.
Right.
And when it gets to a bad enough place, then you have a disease where
right.
something's actually physically breaking down.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been an excellent chat, very informative.
Yes.
If somebody wants to learn more or get a hold of you, where might they do that?
They can call, they can go to www.wellpathcenter.com. Mm-hmm. They can call the clinic at 973-705-7800. And there's a very helpful person on the other end who is very well versed in what I do, and she can answer questions in depth. It's very helpful. And really help understand what that person needs, because everybody's different. I mean, I would say the one takeaway here is that healthcare should be personalized. We are all individuals. Yes, we're all in a human body, but every human body works differently. Every human body has different genetics. It has different experiences. It's had, everything about it's different. So it has to get personalized. So if whoever you're seeing is not personalizing what they're doing to you, you're going to have limited results.
Yeah, and it's not your fault. It's theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate your time. I want to thank everybody that tuned in. We're going to try to keep doing these, so check back often. Thank you so much.